Welcome to another Your Questions edition of the Digital DJ Tips podcast, where DJs from our school ask questions to help them become better DJs and better DJ producers. And we've got a really nice range of questions today, from the biggest challenges for DJs in 2025 to how to successfully play a DJ set on the festival stage, to the one we're going to start with, which is one of those perennials, which is how do DJs deal with requests. As ever, this podcast is supported and paid for by the Digital DJ Tips student community, which means no sponsors and no one paying for any content here. What you're hearing is genuinely questions asked and answered in front of a live audience of students of the world's biggest DJ school. I hope you find it useful, whether you're just interested in DJing or whether you are a DJ looking for some tips to get ahead. Let's get started. Our first question today from our fantastic community is about a topic which is pretty damned universal among DJs. If you mention to any DJ who has ever played in public the single word requests, then you're going to get, if you are prepared to hang around and listen, quite a lot back from them. Because requests are one of those things that, whether you love them or you hate them, and most DJs a bit of each, you cannot avoid them. Requests just come with the territory. And mobile DJs sometimes think, I wish I was a club DJ because I wouldn't get them. Trust me, you do. It's just something that doesn't matter how big or small you are as a DJ. It's not something that you can avoid. It just isn't. So this is the latest iteration of the evergreen, non-stop, perennial request question, if you like. It's from Ryan, and Ryan says, "Hi Phil, I noticed at a gig I did, a house party a few months ago. I've got another one coming up this month. Someone requested a drum and bass tune pretty much in the first hour or so of my set, when I was only playing rock and some alternatives, some hip hop and some R&B, a lot lower energy than the requested tune. My question is, how would you handle such requests when they don't currently match the energy level of the set, i.e. it's too early? I'm thinking especially from the point of view of the requesters frequently asking when their tune is going to be played. Now, I would have thought the best response would be, I'll play it later in the set. But in this sort of gig, compared to a club, as I understand it, requests should take more priority. For reference, I did play the drum and bass tune very soon after the request was made, after being asked a few times. But when I look back, maybe this wasn't such the best idea, since I had to drop the energy back after the set. Ideally, I would have played it at the peak time. Right, yes, you make some very valid points there, Ryan, but more to the point, you've given us a lot to talk about. So what happened with Ryan was he basically caved in to someone who was being impolite and pestering for something which Ryan knew instinctively wasn't going to work. So I think you can probably guess my view on this, Ryan, and I'm going to give it to you in the kind of tough love way we give it to our students here at the school. So the first thing is, requests are not demands, they are requests. The actual word contains the solution to your problem. A request does not always be fulfilled. And so there's a few ways you can set this expectation. One way is to have a notepad that you hand to people. And if they say, can you play something for me? Say, sure, stick it on the requests pad and I'll see if I can get round to it. Another way is to just say what I just said. Yeah, of course, requests are just that. They're not demands. So I hear you, but don't keep coming back, please. I think there's an element here of give them an inch and they'll take a mile, right? So you said that you were asked a few times. To me, that's just impolite. To me, that is where you've got to assert your authority. Now, asserting your authority is something you can always do as a DJ as long as you smile while you do it and as long as you're polite. I don't think there's ever a time to be impolite or to snap at people, although we've all done it. I'll squeeze your request in, I promise you, but it'll be after the other 42 I've been asked, with a smile, right? That kind of thing sometimes works. So really it is just a case of trying to put a bit of a barrier between you and the people making requests, and a notepad is a good way of doing that, although there are other ways. You could have someone with you who takes the requests almost like a an in-booth secretary. But that kind of brings me on to the final point I wanted to make to you, Ryan, which is this. If you're playing at a very small house party or a family party or something along those lines, then really the ebb and flow of the DJ set and the beginning, the middle and the end and the telling a story with your music and stuff, it kind of doesn't really matter quite so much, in all truth, let's be honest about it. And you know what, just playing the music that the 10, 20 people there want to hear when they want to hear it might not be quite such a bad idea. Clearly, if you're in a place where the people are not all as one, if you like, so you're in a bigger place where there's different crowds of people in there who are not intermingling and who don't know each other, at that point it becomes a bit more of a problem. Because if someone is pestering you for a tune in your living room, everyone else in the living room knows that's what's happening, right? So ultimately they know, they can see what's going on. You need to be a bit more professional in public when there's a larger number of people, and your job is to kind of unite them behind what you're doing, not behind what other people are kind of pushing and pulling you to do. So you do need to bear in mind the context as well. Now, there are some fantastic articles on digitaldjtips.com about this very thing, where we go into a lot more detail. So do go and take a look there. You can just click the magnifying glass that you find in the top right hand corner of the website and type in requests and they will all come up. And I've got a wonderful story for you. One of the best friends of Digital DJ Tips, which is 15 years old this year, by the way. We have been running for 15 years. We've got a whole load of celebrations coming up when we officially kick off our 15th anniversary. But one of our friends over many of those years, Chuck, also in the Netherlands, is here with us today, as often is the case in our live audience. And Chuck says, it does depend to a certain extent how big the person asking is, how big the guy asking is. I agree. But the story that Chuck wants to point out is it also depends whether it's Saddam Hussein's son. And yes, Chuck was DJing in an extremely prestigious hotel somewhere in the Middle East and had to take requests one night from the very person I just mentioned, and was extremely tactful in the way he dealt with it, and even got the respect of the aforementioned person, the aforementioned character. So there you go. Thank you, by the way, to Scott in our audience, who put his hand up and said, congratulations for 15 years. Coolness, says Scott. Okay, so Ryan, I hope that helps you. If you have any other request stories, live audience, please do share them and I will share them with our podcast audience. But I'm going to move on to the next question that you have asked today, which is from Peter. And Peter's question is about DJing on iPads. Because this is a good one, because if you think about it, the iPad should be a fantastic tool to DJ on, like your phone. I mean, we have a tutor here, Laidback Luke, who does DJ on his phone. He plays the biggest festival stages with his phone propped up behind a very small DJ controller. So you can do it, but the iPad, I think, is probably, for the sake of our eyes and for the sake of having something a bit more substantial, you'd expect it to be kind of the best mix of features, wouldn't you? It's really durable. We're used to carrying iPads around everywhere with us, but it's got a nice big screen. They're obviously a lot more powerful. And so an iPad could be the perfect thing to DJ with. And they haven't really taken off in that role, which has always been something I've found curious. Now, many years back in this 15-year stretch of time that we've been running Digital DJ Tips, one of the very first publications that we made was an iBook, and the iBook was on the Apple bookstore and it had videos embedded in it and stuff, and it was all about how to DJ on the iPad. And I thought the idea was people would read the book on the device that they were DJing on and it would be useful and stuff. But that kind of alerted me to the fact that iPad DJing has remained a pretty niche thing. And I think the reason for that, and we will get onto your question, Peter, I think the reason for that is that getting your music on and off the thing is a pain. So with your laptop, cumbersome though they are, and easy to break though they are, and so on, you can do everything on one piece of kit. You can be on the download stores, you can be buying music, you can be arranging your music, you can be editing your music, you can be making your mashups and your re-edits and your production software. And when it's time to DJ, everything's there. And it's pretty trivial to start DJing with a laptop because of that. But if you're DJing with an iPad, Most of the things I just described, you're going to do somewhere else. You're not going to do them on the iPad. So now you've got to get the music onto the iPad. And traditionally, they've been designed to be hard to make that stuff work. Now, even now, with the fact that you can have access to your files and so on an iPad, and if you're using a cloud service, they're there. Even now, there are still barriers to doing this, which just mean it's a little bit clunky and a little bit annoying. And I think that's one of the reasons that it hasn't really taken off, despite there being good DJ apps on iPads. But anyway, Peter is thinking along those lines. Peter says, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Rekordbox iOS/iPad app. Now, Rekordbox is one of the biggest DJ apps. So if you're not a DJ listening to this, it's the app that is used to prepare music and to play music with Pioneer DJ equipment and equipment along those lines. So a big name. Peter says there's very little currently that I can find that gives you a sense of how well this would work in 2025. In theory, it seems that using a Rekordbox DJ controller plus an iPad could be a better experience than a controller and laptop. And also, it could be a better experience than a standalone system. And so Peter says, I'm considering a secondary mobile setup and weighing up the trade-off between those two things. Should I get a standalone system for a secondary DJ setup, or should I use a small controller and an iPad running this software, which are about the same cost? Okay, so let's unpack that. So I think we've already covered why, for most DJs, most of the time, it might be fiddlier than it is worth using an iPad to DJ from, with or without hardware. Funnily enough, without hardware, it's actually more fun because you tend to be not being serious about your DJing at that point. You're just kind of like sat in a garden with the barbecue going, or around the pool. You've got a Bluetooth speaker connected to your iPad, and you've got your Apple Music plugged in or whatever, and you're just playing songs, and it's just a bit more fun to do it on a DJ app, right? So for casual DJing, it is still pretty good. But you're quite right, Peter. It does seem like it might be a good choice against a standalone system. A standalone system, by the way, again, if you're not a DJ, it's just one of those boxes that's got everything in it. You don't even need a laptop. It's all built in. It's got a screen and all that kind of stuff. And they can be quite good as well for a second system. So for instance, a mobile DJ who maybe has a proper big DJ setup, but they're also hired to, say, play a wedding, and they want to go and do something at the reception in the garden of the hotel or whatever, they'll have a smaller system like this. And that's what Peter's talking about here. So I would say that you're probably best off going for the standalone system, Peter, for all the reasons that we've talked about. You can DJ using the Rekordbox DJ app on certain kit. Some of the smaller controllers will work with that. I think even the Groove 6, the slightly bigger unit they released recently, will, but certainly the little ones like the Flex 2 and the Flex 4, the stuff people tend to buy at the beginning of their journey, they'll definitely work with it. I think the company are thinking, you know what? It's the first step, and that if they've been DJing on their iPad for fun, they might step up to using a beginner piece of kit. But I just think it's easier to do the whole lot on a laptop personally. And that's why it's not really taken off. The interesting thing about the Rekordbox app, which is worth pointing out, is that of all the companies who make DJ software, and the DJ software we're talking about here, Rekordbox, is not particularly brilliant. Certainly on a laptop, I personally find it clunky and infuriating and lots of other things. But one of the things they do well, or at least one of the things they do better than the others at the moment, in my view, is the cloud. Is this idea that you can have a version of their software running on all kinds of things. You could have it on your work computer, you could have it on your laptop, on a backup laptop, on your phone, on your iPad, and you can be preparing your music, preparing your playlist, even rehearsing your mixes. And all the work you do on any of those units will be there when you go and play on another one of those units. And they do it better currently than anyone else does, even to the point where with certain professional gear, you can log in and everything I just described is there without any laptop or iPhone or iPad being present. So because of that, it might just be worth bearing in mind that were you to go down that route, you would find it probably one of the better routes for pro DJing. However, if I were you, Peter, to answer your question directly, I would buy one of the smaller standalone units because they are more useful generally. However, a few thoughts coming through in the live chat, which is also always good to have. Firstly, it's always nice to know that we're helping. So Peter, thank you for your thumbs up there to the answer I gave you. The big difference, says Chuck, for a laptop is no touchscreen. Yes, that is true. But whether that's a benefit or not is another thing. You know, do you really want a big touchscreen that can affect what comes out of the speakers when you're playing in front of other people? Or would you rather have the controls that you are used to using on a piece of hardware? Peter says, I sync my Rekordbox library on my main computer to my iPhone and to my iPad. That's how I do it. So thank you for sharing that there. So that isn't an issue for me, says Peter. Certainly it's worth considering, but I do think that unless you're using Rekordbox's own cloud, it might just be better off to stick with a standalone unit. That's what I would do anyway. So any more thoughts on requests or DJing on iPads? Live audience, students, please do share them. I will take some time to go back and pick them out and read them out if you have anything else to add there. A couple of you pointing out that there are DJ controllers that have got slots in them for you to put your iPad in. There's a device called the Reloop Buddy, which lets you slot the iPad in the back, and it gives you quite a nice little system where everything can be picked up with two hands and carried away. Yes, you're right. So it kind of does make it a little bit more skewed towards, it can be a bit of fun DJing with an iPad. The problem is I find with those, I like to have my laptop higher than my gear. So I like to have a stand that lifts my laptop up to a bit closer to eye level. And so if you've got a little DJ controller with an iPad or a phone kind of propped into the back of it, to me it's just too far away from my poor old eyes and I'm hunching down to look at it. So they don't really work for me, those, but doesn't mean they won't work for you. All stuff to bear in mind. So thank you, Peter, for that. We're going to move on to a very quick one I'm going to deal with now, but I'm going to widen it out to a bigger picture. And this is from Tom, who says quite simply, do you think, let's put some context on this. Recently, Apple Music has made a massive splash by saying, hey, you can now use Apple Music inside DJ platforms, and it's been added to some of the big DJ platforms and even some of the gear, the standalone gear we were just talking about, where you don't need to have a laptop. And it's a big deal. Of course, it's a big deal. Apple Music has got a large chunk of the streaming market, nowhere near as big as Spotify, but you know, alongside Amazon and YouTube, it's one of the big three coming up behind Spotify, I would say. Well, I know. So the fact that Apple Music has added that is a big deal. But the trouble is that there's older gear that doesn't work with it. And Tom says, do you think my gear, Tom happens to have a Denon DJ Prime 4, can be somehow adapted to work? Now, the problem is, well, to answer your question in short, Tom, no, it won't be. Unfortunately, your gear will never work with Apple Music. And the reason is that they have digital rights management. And that is where they have stuff in place to make sure that you don't just record and rip everything from Apple Music because you've suddenly got access to it on DJ gear. And in order to have that work on gear that doesn't need a laptop, they need to build that into the gear, and so they do it into the gear as soon as that's an option. So in other words, the latest gear, hey, we want to put Apple Music in, well, we're going to need to make this tweak. Okay, let's do it. They can't retrospectively do that to the older gear. That's my understanding of why it's not happening. So unfortunately, Tom, yes, there probably are ways they could do it, but no, they're not going to go down the route of, you know, sending out special cards or keys that'll retrospectively make older gear work. It is, however, worth having a conversation about why it's important that Apple Music has suddenly arrived on the DJ scene, because it is important. It is big. And the reason is very, very simple. Until now, the options available to you across the range, and I'm not talking just on one or two edge cases, I'm talking across the board on pretty much all DJ software, pretty much all DJ systems. If you wanted to plug in a streaming service, and by the way, you should. I don't subscribe to this. No, DJs should own all their music stuff. You should have a DJ streaming service, one that works in your DJ app. It's useful for practice. It's useful for discovery. It's useful for when you get a request and you just don't have that song and you really want to play that request. We're not saying for a second as a DJ school that this is something that replaces a carefully curated and owned music collection. Far from it. But people fall into the trap of thinking it's an either or, which absolutely isn't. So yes, you should have a streaming service. Yes, you should also own your own music, just to make that clear. But the reason Apple Music is so important arriving on the scene is, as I was saying, Up until now, the services available across the board are absolute minnows. They're tiny. To put it into some kind of perspective, Tidal is your biggest mainstream choice across most DJ gear up until Apple Music arrived. Tidal has less than 1% of the streaming market. In other words, there are far more DJs out there than Tidal users. So it was DJs realizing that they can use a streaming service like Tidal. That was the kind of thought process. And the same goes for SoundCloud is a lot bigger, but SoundCloud is a very specialized service. And so SoundCloud is another one. And then you've got Beatport and BeatSource. They don't even move the needle. They are two specialized download stores that also offer music streaming. And that's pretty much it across the board. And so Apple Music arriving for DJs as a streaming service is huge, because the difference is, instead of DJs realizing that they can use, as I was saying, Tidal or Beatport or BeatSource, you know, again, if you're a non-DJ listening to this, you might not have even heard of some of those services. Instead of DJs realizing they can use a streaming service, we're now at the point where Apple Music users are being told by Apple and are realizing that they can DJ with their Apple Music collections. And that is absolutely huge for DJing, because there is a far greater number of Apple Music users out there than there are DJs. And everyone, apart from us and hi-fi buffs, of which I am both, by the way, I'm a DJ and a hi-fi buff. So I own music physically and as downloaded files across all areas of my music life. But I'm ancient, right? Everyone below the age of 40 who is not a DJ does not own music unless they're buying coffee table gatefold albums or box sets or whatever. They just don't. They get it all from streaming services. So when one of the biggest streaming services makes a big play about saying we are now available to DJs and adds properly curated DJ sets and mixes and channels to its streaming service, and across the board, as Apple Music did last month, at the drop of a hat, at the same time, makes it available on pretty much all the big platforms, you have to take notice. So it is a big thing for music that Apple Music has arrived. And again, we have DJs saying, oh, but you can't do this with it and you can't do that with it, but they're missing the point. So Jens, I mean, I'm not criticizing DJs for this, but I'm just saying it misses the point. Jens is saying in the comments, but Apple doesn't allow us to use stems. And you're right. And it doesn't allow us to download the tracks from the streaming service or record the sets or all these things that us DJs want to do. But the big story here is that everyone else who isn't a DJ yet is suddenly going to find one of the barriers to entry, i.e., I can't get my music into it, completely removed. And I find that very, very exciting. So there we go, Tom. Unfortunately for your gear, you're never going to get Apple Music, and you're going to have to stick with one of the other services that you can get, like Tidal or SoundCloud or so on. Yeah, it's not the end of the world. But for people moving forward from here who are using the updated software or the new hardware who can use Apple Music, well, that's quite a big deal, because a lot of those people will be getting into DJing because of this, which is exciting. We like to see more people in the DJ world. We were talking about requests a little bit earlier, and Lou says, as far as requests go, sometimes you need to take control, especially when you're DJing for friends and family, because if you don't, it will ruin your time with them. I know a lot of DJs who just will not play for friends and family. They're like, no, they're the one kinds of gigs I'm not going to do, because they're just sick of the politics of it and sick of dealing with this stuff. So I do feel for people who are stuck doing that. Right, well, thank you very much for sharing that. Now, we're going to move on to a question that is a little bit different from the ones we've answered so far, from Don, which I really like this question because it lets us all get our crystal balls out and all share things that might be slightly annoying. Okay, so we're going to have a little whinge session here, but not too much. We're going to keep it positive. Don says, hi Phil, I would love to hear your view on which DJ challenges we will be facing in the near future and how to prepare for those. So live audience, it would be wonderful if we can get your views on this as I give the Digital DJ Tips school view on the challenges that will be facing DJs in the near future. So let's go. Right, so Don, I think the one that is probably on everyone's lips, because it's the one on anyone's lips nowadays when we say the word future, and it's AI. How AI will affect the DJ world. The stock line that I've been using in our lessons and with our students is, you will not be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by a DJ who's figured out how to use AI better than you can. There's a crucial distinction there. I think the thing that a lot of people don't get about AI is it's not very good at the final mile. So you sometimes when broadband and fiber internet and stuff was being rolled out, you'd hear companies saying things like, we can do the final mile. And what that means is that they're selling you the bit that comes to the end user, the bit between, the telephone exchange or the box outside your house and your computer. They're selling you the final bit, the little sprinkle on the top. But it's important because it's the bit that connects everything that happened beforehand with you. It's the bit you see. AI is not very good at that final bit. What AI can do is help you in any area of your life, and we're talking about DJing and music here, up to the point where a human needs to make sure that it's good, or needs to add the final touch, or needs to take the stuff that's been done for them to save them having to do it and turn it into something that is art and that is human and that is worth paying attention to. If you can frame AI in that way, then it's seriously, seriously useful. You can type into ChatGPT, I've been asked to play a DJ set for a wedding couple, one of whom is Puerto Rican and one of whom is British, and I want a playlist that's going to appeal to both sides. Give me some suggestions. Now, the music that is suggested might or will not be the stuff you play, and if it is, Lord help you, but it'll certainly give you a list that if you know what to do, you can cut and paste straight into, hey, Apple Music or wherever, and listen and start to be inspired and start to think through how you're going to deal with that crowd. So it's a great starting point, but you've got to put the end bit on. So I've already given you one example how AI can actually be useful, but as well as being useful, a challenge, because DJs who are doing this are going to get better set lists than you. AI, or at least automation, has already caused big fractures in the DJ world, with people not liking the fact that it does things like beat grids really well, which makes mixing trivial. So DJs who spent half their life learning to mix manually, suddenly their skill is not valued anymore because anyone can do it. And so they maybe understandably get a little bit upset by that. But hey, they can't change it. You can't put the genie back in the box. You can't turn the world back the way it came. And so you have to adopt these things and add the human bit on top. If you've been freed up from doing something by AI that's doing monkey work for you, what are you going to do to stand out? And it could be curation, it could be personality, it could be the show you're putting on, it could be personal service to the people who have hired you. Whatever it is, what can you do that no AI could ever do? We're even going to get to the point where there is generative music, where AI is making the music, and it might even be making it on the spot. The mind goes completely poof, doesn't it, when you think about that? And it's coming, and it's going to come to DJ software near you. And we're going to need to deal with it. But I think keeping an open mind and realizing that the best DJs will not let AI replace them. They will let it do the stuff they don't want to do while they're coming up with great things to do with the time it saved them. I think that's the right approach to this as well. Let's move on to other challenges then. I think the mental health issue is going to become a big one for DJs who are trying to make money out of this, because things are changing very quickly, and DJing has become something that is not just about, collecting 50 great new songs every year, packing a record box and walking out of your house and performing this skill that hasn't really changed for years. DJing now is about, in all kinds of areas, a lot more, and it changes quite quickly. It can be quite hard to keep up with, and it's stressful. And as you get older, things like this, change like this becomes harder. Just to give one example, keeping up with social media and marketing and finding where the people who can book you are online, it changes seemingly every year, right? It goes from Facebook to Instagram to Snapchat to TikTok, and who knows what's around the corner next. And keeping up with this stuff is hard. Now, here at Digital DJ Tips, we teach tactics and strategies for this. We teach DJs to be what we call sovereign. And sovereign means you own your world and the world that provides you with the artistic nurture and the money you need, etc., which is a thing that's built around your own website, your own email list, your own mixes that people come to you to get, and so on. And there's no time to go into that here, but there are ways to alleviate the stress and the mental health issues that come with trying to be a full-time DJ. But also, frankly, do you want to be a full-time DJ? DJing is a fantastic hobby, and it just takes all that stress away from you. And so, certainly something to consider. Let's talk about something else, which is platforms. It's different places that you need to hang out. Now, we've kind of already talked about that from a social media point of view, but where music is discovered seems to change all the time as well, and you better damn well keep up. Funnily enough, this week at Digital DJ Tips, we talked about something which I think is fantastic, which is the charts inside your apps, like Shazam's the big one, of course, where if you go to the Shazam website, and let's face it, who hasn't pressed, or even said, Shazam this for me, and held their phone up? We've all done it. If you go to the Shazam.com website, as of yesterday, there's a new chart you can find there. Let me tell you about the ones they've always had. They've always had a tab that says charts. And by the way, if you've never done this, here is your takeaway from today's podcast. They've always had a tab that says charts, and you can click in there and you can select a country, and you can see what people are Shazamming in that country. Now, Shazam is a tool for the gods. Record industry types only look at two things when they release a new song or album or whatever. They look at the number of times that the track in question has been Shazammed and the amount of radio airplay it's getting, because that tells them, the radio airplay bit tells them how well their promotion of that particular song has worked. In other words, how they've managed to get it out there to the world. But the Shazam bit tells them how well it's landing with the audience, and that's crucial. So Shazam is giving you real life, this is what people are interested in hearing, again, data, right? And you can drill down further than countries. In bigger countries, you can drill down into cities, like, for instance, in the UK, London, Edinburgh, Bristol, etc. And you can also drill down into genres. So for instance, in the UK, you get, if I remember rightly, pop, dance, and hip hop and rap as your kind of three big genres. So to be able to go and see the big Shazammed songs in hip hop and rap in the UK, like right now, is pretty awesome. And of course, where you are. So there's one platform that if you're not doing that, you're behind, right? But they've just introduced a new chart called the viral chart. And this is the stuff that's not necessarily being Shazammed the most. It's the stuff where the Shazams are growing the quickest, which again is fantastic. And that's available there. And they've put it on Apple Music as well. But look, people are discovering music on TikTok. TikTok is huge for music. Tracks are getting into the charts purely on TikTok plays. And of course, Netflix, I mean, Stranger Things was the classic for reintroducing classic 80s tracks. Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill became a big hit recently, having first been a hit back in the 80s. Fantastic track to drop in any DJ set ever since it was released, by the way. And things like that. So look, there were always new platforms, there were always new places to discover music, and there were always new things you have to be doing as a DJ. So keeping up with the platforms and the music, especially as these things are fragmenting. I remember, and I'm going to go totally nostalgic on you now, because I'm from the Thames Valley in the United Kingdom, which is where the River Thames, that starts up somewhere near Oxford, winds down to London and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, at which point it's huge and it goes under Tower Bridge and it goes out into the estuary. I live in the Thames Valley, or at least I used to. And in hot summer Sunday afternoons, as I remember from my childhood, my dad would chuck us all in the car and we'd drive down to the meadows on the edge of the river, and everyone would have the car boot open with a picnic and a blanket, but everyone would have their radio on, and everyone was tuned to Radio 1, the pop music station, and between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. everyone had the top 40 on. And we used to sit there. It was like a big kind of like open air car park rave or meadow rave. We used to sit there with our, packet of salt and shake crisps and our bottle of Coke, going for a swim in the river every now and then. But when we came back, we'd be listening wherever we wandered to the same music being played across the whole place. Wonderful. Those Sunday afternoon sessions, and also 12:45 on a Tuesday when the charts were actually announced, for us music fans, they were the only places you went to hear about new music, right? How it's changed now. There is no such thing anymore. If you had 50 cars in a field now, all with their boots open, it would be a cacophony because everyone would be playing something different. Music is fragmented, so keeping up with the platforms is a big challenge for DJs going forward, I think. And the fourth thing I want to talk about is audience expectations. This is another big one. So this has changed so much over the decades that I've been a DJ and a teacher. And it's something that we have to move with. So the equipment and the attention span have kind of created this perfect storm where the equipment allows you to mix very quickly, and the doom scrolling, flicking generation who just one thing, whether it's Facebook or whether it's Tinder or whether it's whatever, it's just next. These two things combined mean that for some DJs, not being able to mix like that means that they're not getting the gigs, or they're being trumped by DJs who can do that. Not everyone, and there's a big case to be made for letting songs play and all that. It's a debate we could get into, but audience expectations have changed. One place where they really have changed that I think every DJ needs to keep up with, Don, is the kind of Instagrammability of what you're doing, both audio and visual. You cannot turn up, set up a kitchen table and plonk a load of hi-fi gear with wires everywhere and a couple of big flashing lights and play records end to end and mumble into a microphone and call it DJing anymore. You simply can't do that. You need to look good, and you need to have a basic level of mixing. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because back in the day, you were a mixing DJ if you played one genre. You played house, or you played trance, or you played techno, or you played hip hop, and you mixed. Or you were a mobile DJ playing to several generations of one family at an event, a wedding, an anniversary, or whatever. And then you played all of their music, all the different types of music they wanted to hear, and you spoke between those tracks on the microphone, or at least you didn't mix them. But now, the audiences who have been brought up with DJs and social media and festivals expect their mobile DJs to be able to mix like the club DJs. And that is actually one of the hardest types of DJing to do, even with all the tools of modern DJing. That's why at Digital DJ Tips, some of our best selling courses are the ones that teach that. Our Mixing for Mobile and Wedding DJs course, our courses by the likes of Jazzy Jeff and DJ Angelo, and so on, are deliberately open format courses that teach you how to mix all these different types of music like a professional, because that is a minimum standard that is increasingly expected. So again, having your skills up at that minimum level is a challenge if you're a DJ that's come from the old school. So I've talked about AI and mental health and platforms and audience and expectations as things that I think are DJing challenges. But what do you think? As a few comments have been coming in the chat while I've been talking, so I'll scan through some of them here. Chuck says, frankly, I actually kind of like playing more songs in an hour. It saves me from boredom. Yes, what do we do between the songs if we're playing the whole song? It is true. And the Ruckus says, no kidding about overwhelm. Ever since I subscribed to Beatport, I've been overwhelmed. There's so much music out there. I think one of the tricks is to realise that you don't have to know all the music that's out there just as well, because it's actually impossible to do so. So thank you for those comments there. Expectations, says Craig, are dependent upon who you are playing for as well. This is a very wise comment. Thank you, Craig. Craig says, I want to start playing old folks' homes on an off night. I want to give a monthly disco giveaway. Call it Wednesday Night Fever. What do you think? I think it's absolutely brilliant, Craig. And just don't treat old people as, I'm sure you wouldn't, but don't treat older adults as kind of just one group. Because let's be honest, yesterday's old is not today's old, is it? So people are people are into all kinds of things as they get older. So yeah, you might find that you get some really knowledgeable people who can, give you musical wisdom as well as you giving them something different on a Wednesday night there, Craig. So thank you for sharing that. So Mixmaster G says, I still listen to the Dutch Top 40 every Saturday religiously to stay current. I do as well. They used to have it on here in Gibraltar between 5 and 7 p.m. on a Sunday, just like they did in England all those decades ago. And literally in the last few weeks, they've cancelled the chart show here. So I'm a bit upset by that. But hey, there you go. Times do move on. It became part of our family anyway, because we have a home over the border. Gibraltar's a tiny place and Spain is a big place just nearby. So at the weekends we go to our weekend home, and we were always driving back to where Digital DJ Tips is and where our life is and where the kids go to school here in the little Rock of Gibraltar. We were always driving back at chart time on a Sunday to join the big queue of people coming back in. And we always had the charts on. And guess what? You'd be sat there in the queue to get across the border and the person in the car next to you had the charts on as well. And it was nice. It reminded me of when I was a kid. But they've stopped it in their wisdom. So there we go. Ben says, I think a big challenge for DJs is finding different places to DJ. Certainly in my town, says Ben, local venues are in decline. I DJ in the only place left in my town that has a DJ. I'm already thinking about what I can DJ where I can DJ when the venue goes. So gyms, online, busking, says Ben. I'm too shy to do that, he adds, and special events and so on. It's true, times are changing, but I guess modern DJ gear does give us the chance to DJ in places that we wouldn't have been able to DJ otherwise. For instance, I potentially got a gig at the top of the Rock of Gibraltar, which is interesting. They've got this thing called the Skywalk up there, which is literally a glass panel that just goes out and you're looking down and you're like, whoa, because there's nothing underneath your feet. And potentially a gig up there because, well, it's a long story. I'll tell you it some other time. But I could never do that with old-fashioned DJ gear, right? But I can certainly get a battery controller up there and do it with that. So I'm going to move on now to our final question from the student community here at Digital DJ Tips today. And this is from Matt, who did pester me and say, you are going to answer my question, aren't you? I am, Matt, and here it comes. Matt says, I consider myself, we've already talked a little bit about this, I consider myself an open format DJ, but I would love to get more into house music because I hope to play festivals. I currently DJ for college and for pro sports teams here in Florida. So I'm playing a lot of house remixes of popular songs, but my concern with trying to go straight into say tech house or something is that I'll pick songs that people who follow that genre will be like, what the heck's this? So Matt says, should I try to make my own blends with top tech house tracks or just start following the charts and dive in? Currently I play mostly generic house music like John Summit, Dom Dollar, etc. Okay, so a couple of things here. Well, firstly, playing music that keeps the specialist underground crowd happy while keeping the mainstream crowd happy at the same time is one of the arts of DJing, and some of the best DJs do it very well, Matt. Acapellas are your friends, remixes in styles that are currently trendy of music that everyone knows are your friends, and there's lots of other ways of doing it, but just bear that thought in mind. But this is the main thing I wanted to share with you here, and to widen this out to something that I think is important about DJs and creativity. Matt, you should play what you love. Otherwise, what's the point? You won't get to play festivals by second guessing what you think they want, especially as you are clever enough to have already highlighted that if you try and do that, people will be like, who the hell's this and what the hell are they trying to do here? You should play what you love. And the reason for that is that that's the only way you'll find your own sound. You don't get to play the biggest events and the best slots by guessing what to play or copying other people. You get to play those things by doing something different. And the only way you get to find what that difference is to look inside yourself and to develop your own sound. So I certainly agree with taking what you can get. Like if you get offered a festival gig, take it, Matt. If you get offered to play a funk set somewhere, a retro funk set, take it. If you get offered to play a Latin club, take it. You're going to be scared out of your wits. But guess what? You're going to do what it takes to not make an absolute fool of yourself at those gigs, which is going to involve going to the club, talking to other DJs, researching online, using your streaming service, etc., etc. You probably sometimes will do well, sometimes not so well, but you will learn so much in your first 100 gigs by playing as wide a variety of gigs as you can. So we always say to DJs, if you've got 1% of you that thinks, I really want to do that, take it. Play that gig, learn from it, but you will be learning from it a lot of the time. Only when you've played, and it's an arbitrary number, 100 gigs, a couple of years worth of gigs, will you start to realize that there's certain songs that really work for you, that really talk to you, and that you're managing to weave into all kinds of DJ sets. Go and find more songs like those. What you're starting to do there is build your sound, and your sound is what's going to make you the DJ that gets offered the festival gigs and that gets booked for what you do. So that's my advice to you there, Matt. Thank you very much for that question. Well, that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you so much to everyone who contributed. It was a lively discussion as ever, but I think we covered some really big, broad topics today. I particularly enjoyed talking about Apple Music arriving in streaming. It's one of those things that didn't seem like a big thing, but actually I think it probably will give a real shot in the arm for the next generation of DJs, finding that they can just DJ with all the music they own without having to do any of the stuff that appears a little bit lame with downloading or signing up for new streaming services and that stuff. DJing can sometimes be a little bit behind the rest of the world, and I think it just caught up in a big area. Anyway, you can find out more about all these topics, of course, over on the Digital DJ Tips website, where you'll find thousands of articles and features and reviews about the world of DJing. And if you'd like to learn with Digital DJ Tips all the skills of DJing, do check out our courses, which you'll find in the same place. But meanwhile, from me, Phil, here in the studio, just a final thank you to all of our students for making this possible. We'll see you again very soon. Until next time, get good, get out there and make the moments. Bye-bye for now.